Tim Elmore, who you may know from the Habitude series, and if you don't, you really should. Great thinking points for leaders, great perspective. But he shares the lecture that he gave his daughter when she was making the move from passenger to driver. Similar lecture that we may have given all of our teenagers in that terror when they first began to drive. He explained to her that she would no longer have the luxury of staring mindlessly out the window, that she would no longer have the luxury of focusing on what was happening outside the car or not focusing on what was happening. That she would now, as she moved from passenger to driver, that it would be her responsibility to know what was going on with the maintenance of the car, to worry about the safety of her passengers, to anticipate the decisions of the other drivers and the conditions of the road, that all of these things she would need to consistently and constantly concern herself with. And ladies and gentlemen, that's leadership. If you have taken on the role from passive passenger in your organization, when you can fold your arms and say, why doesn't somebody do something about this? And you've taken on the responsibility of leadership, that's now your perspective. And anybody who's been in leadership for more than a minute and a half can tell you that leadership in itself is a trip. So let's spend some time talking about what the successful keys are to making this journey worthwhile, to making sure that this journey takes our passengers where we want to get them. Any successful journey is dependent upon the quality of several things. First and foremost is your navigation. What is your compass in education? What is your compass as a leader? Then we need to look at the accuracy of our map. Is what we're operating from the most up-to-date information? Are we operating from the most up-to-date information? Do we have connection? Do we have collaboration with other travelers? And ultimately, the success depends on the skill of the individual who is at the helm of the vessel, and that's you. Education in the modern era for our students and staff, at best case scenario, is an arduous trek. It's up to leaders at all levels to consistently move the industry forward, not just to prepare the industry for 21st century realities, but prepare our students, our staff, and those future leaders for where we want them to be. And just as anyone under the wheel of a vehicle must first understand the basics of driving, and through what's usually an intimate knowledge of that driver's manual, educational leaders must first understand we don't have a single manual for success. Instead, there is a volume of information and theorists left for us to weed through to determine what is best for our organization, what best meets our needs as a leader, and the needs, most importantly, of those that we're serving, and what best matches up with our goals. Analyzing and deconstructing these theories is inherent to what we do in education. Heaven knows we are nothing if not reflective in education. But unfortunately, the volume of information can leave a lot of leaders at a loss as to where to even begin. To maneuver through this specific pitfall, we have to wade through this information, looking specifically to what these structures can bring to our organization. We have to look at the goals that we have collectively. We have to look at the distance of the journey that's needed, where we are to where we want to get, what navigators we already have in place, and what navigational specialties do we need. We got to look at the special needs of our little travelers, and most importantly, the condition of our vehicle. Where are we now? Is our vehicle in a place where it can make this trip, or is there maintenance needed? All of these considerations are going to provide information that a new leader is going to need for each phase of the journey. Given that change is the only true constant in education, everything that we look at as a leader, we need to look at through the lens of change. Once we're comfortable with our knowledge, once we understand who we are as leaders, once we understand what vision, what educational realities, what leadership realities match up to fuel our journey, then we can come armed with mission and vision in hand, ready to take on this journey. Unfortunately, this is where many potential leaders are often derailed, because this is where the rubber meets the road for management. Management's not a dirty word, but it's not the totality of leadership either. Unfortunately, for years, it's kind of become an opportunity to malign leaders. Oh, he's not a leader, he's just a manager. Unfortunately, success in this industry is contingent upon your ability to merge those two. Marrying leadership and management is really a true key to success. It's a key to building our organization. Successfully leading an organization and managing all of its components means that as a leader, you must first see your team clearly with coherence, collaboration, and most importantly, capacity building. Coherence, our first critical C, is often described as a shared depth of understanding the nature and purpose of the work. I think the shared piece is the most important element when we're talking about coherence. It's all too often leaders feel as if they've arrived at coherence when they've clearly communicated their purpose. If only it were that simple. It's true coherence for the group has to involve a level of intentionality in every element of your purpose, ensuring that your leadership actions, again, back to walking the walk and walking the talk, are focused on achieving our common vision. Only when this level of shared understanding is achieved can we then begin rowing together on this journey, and only then can true collaboration become part of this journey. Collaboration, that is our second critical C. The realization of collaboration education is truly high-octane fuel toward reaching the ultimate destination of student success. As a leader within a school or a district, working collaboratively is a non-negotiable in the 21st century. Decisions that leaders have to make for true collaboration to occur. And finally, capacity building that uses this collaborative network. So our third critical C, capacity building, is the natural next leg. This component is really what puts the pedal to the metal. This is where you feel a need for speed. How does this level of acceleration help our teams grow? We go farther, we go faster, we go deeper when we build capacity in those around us. It advances the speed that new initiatives can be implemented because it increases the depth of learning, because it creates this culture of reflection. How does this impact our future teams? Yes, often, quick success is a flash in the pan. But this builds future teams because we've built capacity, not just in our individuals, but in our team as a whole. It changes the whole culture. It also increases the likelihood that lasting change will occur, because no leadership initiative will result in true change if we don't have the right people in the right seats. That's where it's important to ensure that our staff matches the goals of our journey. This is where the apex of true leadership, traditional leadership, collides with the skills and design of 21st century management. It's important to explore where and how to begin the course of getting those right people in the right seats. Teacher recruitment is an area in which we really have to start looking at other industries. We have to evaluate the recruiting processes in other industries. The current status of talent recruitment in education is dastardly lagging behind the process that we need to advance our students. The first critical change that we need to make is end our passive recruitment strategies. Leaders need to be intentional in aggressively pursuing candidates. And this goal is twofold. This allows us to pursue the best candidates and match up those who best match to our organization. But it also sends a message that this is an important process. It sends a message that we value candidates. So often we expect the talent to come to us. And unfortunately, the state of education with our retention crisis does not allow that to be best practices. We want to attract valuable candidates. We have to give the impression that we value the candidates. So once we have these talented navigators in the driver's seat, how do we keep them? The statistics tell us that currently what we're doing doesn't work. So this is a point that we're going to have to look at. What do our navigators need to continue to be part of our organization, to continue to feel valued? One of the key elements in that is helping them hone their craft. Professional development is an area in which our industry has been dramatically mismanaged for decades. There's a recent Washington Post journal that describes, in one of the larger districts in our country, an initiative in which they spent $500 million. For those of us in low wealth districts, it's almost unimaginable that you had $500 million to throw at professional learning and you blew it. But that's exactly what happened. They spent $500 million on a new professional development initiative, and there was virtually no change in student performance. So how do we avoid such debacles? Really, it's not as complicated as these gigantic failures would make it seem. We've got to begin basing development upon evidence-based practices. What works, and do that. Diminish the presenter model. Professional development is not something we go and receive. It's a verb. It's something we do. We invest in people and they develop. We've got to replace the current model with something that holds the process accountable through observation, through feedback. Successful professional development would be valuable not only in retention, but in recruitment as well. And we know we have to do more in both areas. Teacher support and retention efforts have to become intentional and aggressive in simplifying the profession for new teachers and supporting them as they grow into this challenge. We've all experienced that mentality that new teachers have to earn their dues. Often some of our valuable veterans will say, I paid my dues. Unfortunately, that's not what's best for our industry. One recent success we've seen in Louisiana in a program they termed Shelter and Develop did just that for educators. It sheltered them from many of these challenges and served to develop them while they were growing. It supported them with the supplies that they needed. It didn't put them in overrun classrooms. It gave them the support that they needed through instructional co-teaching. They received co-teaching blocks daily. And the retention levels, just in the short-lived the program, it's just a few years in, is showing this works. This successful innovation reinforces the idea that the answer to reaching uncharted territory in education is only going to occur when we become brave enough to blaze new paths. Simply throwing programs and throwing money and doing the same thing that we've always done will result in the same thing that's always happened, and that's what has brought us to a recruitment and a retention crisis. So where does this journey begin? Well, for all of us, it's going to look a little different because where we're going is just a little different. The one commonality for each individual leader's journey is that you don't get anywhere on an empty tank. So before you start this process and throughout the process, be mindful of what you need to do to make sure that you're operating with your full capabilities, that your tank is full, because otherwise you have nothing to give.